Welcome to Getting Better with Dr. Adam. Dr. Adam Silberstein is a clinical psychologist who has been working in the field since 1993. With a broad range of clinical experience, including state psychiatric hospitals, adolescent residential treatment with a trauma focus, the Department of Corrections, and in the addiction treatment arena. Adam is currently in private practice and serves as a clinical consultant and supervisor for a number of treatment centers.
I just had the honor of meeting with my personal meditation teacher, which is a story in and of itself of how I stumbled upon Jeff Kober, who isn't who you'd think would be somebody, based on my line of work at least, who would teach me meditation. This is a Renaissance man who is a actor first. He's a career actor, has been in so many different movies and television shows, including The Walking Dead, Sons of Anarchy, The New Girl, Shameless, just to name a few, 24. And I just stumbled upon him in life because I watched somebody go from a state of bothered to a state of serenity. And I asked this individual who I saw, I said, what happened? And he said, I have this meditation teacher. And I started meditating twice a day. And there began, I got the number of this teacher, and there began my journey in meditation with Jeff Kober. And I just met with Jeff, and he shared with us his story of meditation and what he believes are the core principles and the benefits of the meditation he teaches, which is called Vedic meditation. I hope you enjoy it. Very, very fortunate today to have the distinguished meditation teacher, Renaissance man, actor, musician, artist, Jeff Kober. And I want to take a minute to share about my experience with Jeff Kober. I'd say it was early on in Jeff's teaching career. I didn't know him, but I had heard of him because I was attending this community support group, and there was a man there, and I would see this man week after week. It wasn't Jeff, it was a different man. And he looked very bothered. He looked irritated. He had this underlying state of bother that was chronically present. And over time, the chronic bother that I witnessed in this man started to evaporate. And it was like, and he kept saying, I added a second meditation. And I was watching him, and it was bizarre because I was wondering what happened to this guy's bother. And he kept, in the process, he was saying, I'm struggling with the second meditation, but then I added it. And lo and behold, he finally said, I committed to my second meditation. And this individual stopped being bothered. So after a long while, I walked up to the guy and I said, how'd you do this? And he said, I'm telling you, it's all about this meditation. He gave me a number, Jeff Kober. And I'm like, here I am. I'm a clinical psychologist, a doctoral level trained psychologist. He gives me some guy named Jeff Kober. And I didn't call, I'm like, well, I'm not calling that. Right? I'm not calling that. And but I kept the card, and I was working in a treatment setting that it was very residential treatment for dual diagnosis, drug and alcohol, mental health is a very, very, very stressful environment. I was so stressed out. And I said, fine, I'm going to go check out what Jeff Kober is about. So I go listen to a speech. I'm like, this is really cool. Me and my brother went, and then I'm like, oh, this is crazy. This is expensive. This is crazy. So I ignored it for a little while longer. And then I get this, it's only happened to me one time. I got this court case that I was invited to participate in as a kind of like a subject matter expert. And I'm like, me? And they're like, yeah, you. And the amount that they were paying was the exact amount that the class cost. And I'm like, okay. And in the class, in the introductory space where I had gone a few months prior to hear about it, I thought it was important, if I'm going to do this with, both feet in, do this seriously. So I happened to have this case that I never got another case like that. I don't think I did a bad job, but I just think it was a one and done sort of situation. Somebody met me, they had this opportunity, I had to do it. And I started this experience of, I'm going to commit to meditation. So, and here I meet this Jeff Kober, actor, kind of way cooler than my story about myself, at least to me, right? Way cooler than me, than I would, he's got like the right hair, the right look. He's been on all these TV shows, and he happens to have this passion for acting and meditation all at once. And I'm like, and he's attracting, artsy folks, and I'm not that artsy. And I just go and I get this meditation thing, and there's no like PhD, MD, or anything, and I go and I do it. And so I want to tell you, just for me, and I was describing earlier what prompted this was watching this guy, but also like wearing life very heavy. And this is after a lot of work. This is after a lot of self-help and therapies and a great trajectory. Meaning I really did well in life in terms of mental health, right? I became, and I, I'm somebody who was seen even at that time, wow, you've really come a long way. And I can't tell you how much, it's probably been about 10 years, these last 10 years have impacted me because of the gift that you gave me, Jeff. So it's with honor and humility that I feel so fortunate to have you here talking to me. And I want to add one more thing. Something like this, me saying I'm going to do a podcast for fun, right? I really do see it as a product of one of the things that comes with being a committed meditator. So for me, what it's meant is, there are certain things it meant and there are certain things it didn't mean. So what it didn't mean is I'm relaxed all the time, right? What it didn't mean is that during meditation, I'm levitating all the time. What it didn't mean is that it feels good. What it didn't mean is that my thoughts, I don't have thinking anymore. It doesn't mean I don't have distress, but what it did mean is something happened very quickly to me where I became, my level of focus and engagement completely changed. It was as if I got a second day available to me. So what used to be one day became almost 2 days. After the second meditation, it was like another day. And collectively, I don't think the in-moment experiences, periodically they're cool, but the collective of all these years of being very disciplined about this, just twice a day experience and working with you over the years, there's something that has happened to me that isn't about how I feel in the day, but more about how I feel overall. And I think that what it helped me build is a sense of I like me way more than I did before I started. So for that big preamble, I am grateful. Welcome.
Thanks so much. I don't think I've ever been called distinguished before.
You are distinguished in this room, doctorate or not.
Thank you very much.
So I want to ask you first, why is a guy with this resume that includes The New Girl, The Walking Dead, Sons of Anarchy, Big Dog, Sully, Beauty Mark, 24, right? What on earth are you sitting here talking to me about meditation for?
It's a very good question. I never wanted to be a meditation teacher. I didn't set out to do that. I had a teacher myself, and he said, "You need to become a teacher." And I said, "Forget it, man. I'm an actor." He said, "Well, you've already learned too much. You're a teacher. Whether you want to be or not, the only question is, will you be an informed teacher or an uninformed teacher?" And the fact is that I ended up teaching this because it changed my life. I was the second angriest person I ever knew. I was in darkness and despair most of the time. And I had about 70% of a life present for me. even after years and years and years of recovery, of psychotherapy, of physical therapy, of emotional processes of all kinds, trying to get clear and free of my history, of my past, and unable to do it. Still walking around with a weight. And I learned this meditation, and all of that changed.
So like me, you were a person who was invested in self-improvement prior to meditation.
You know, and I had to be, because I was a mess. I was a mess. And there was no way to fix everything wrong with me. There was a way to drop underneath everything and I say wrong with quotes around it. There's a way to drop beneath that and find an underlying truth that then guides one in a direction of how to expand, how to become what we're meant to be, and how to become more healthy and present.
So try to break it down for me. When the underlying truth, which I connect to when you talk about it, has been my experience, despite the drama in my head, there's something anchoring me that isn't all the drama, that's something else, that's much more connected. Right. What is life like absent that? And I know you use words, messed up, crazy, recovery, all these things. What does it mean to not have that?
Well, what it means is there are a bunch of perspectives in here. I'm not going to say there's a bunch of personalities, but there are a bunch of different perspectives. It's like the perspective that says, wow, I'm so glad that I stopped eating sugar because now I'm feeling great. And then you wake up and the guy who eats sugar just goes like candy bar and throws it down. Same guy, but a completely different perspective, who's not paying attention to the fact that pants no longer fit and that sugar always gives me a headache. It's just like immediate gratification. I need that. And without an underlying truth, there's no way of knowing what I am other than who wakes up in the driver's seat, who comes into the driver's seat. And that's driven by all these disparate demands that we place on ourselves, both from just our physical survival nature and from what we were taught as children. What do we need to do emotionally to survive? What do we need to do intellectually to survive? How do we need to be in order to please them to survive? And these demands get placed on us, and there's no organizing principle. Religion is an attempt to put that organizing principle on one from the outside. And if you don't do this, you're going to hell. That's how I was raised. And well, I was raised German Lutheran, which is basically you're going to hell. Just
deal with it.
Someone like you,
just deal with
done.
it. Well, you, Jeff Kober, are for sure.
Dead
man walking.
I'm done.
Yeah.
And even if I do it all right, at the last minute, I'll say or do the wrong thing, and then I'll be in hell for an eternity. That's like, wow.
But even with that, the attempt there in religion, despite messages that may have been, diluted over time, but the intention is to provide an anchoring like you're describing. So to not be at the mercy of, I like the way you put it, whoever's in the driver's seat at that moment.
Yeah.
The immediate competing demands of life, and how I'm one big walking reaction to whatever's going on, whatever feeling state I have. That could be a collection based on a collection of a myriad of experiences and current stressors which I'm perceiving.
Right.
So the attempt that what you're saying is I was lost in that.
Well, yeah, and for someone like me, I'm sure there are words for it. I'm hypersensitive. I'm emotionally big. I feel others really deeply, and so feelings are just like they're just these waves that crash through me. And you listen to the biggest voice in the room, and if the biggest voice in the room is your feelings, your emotions, then that seems like truth. even though they're shifting all the time.
Right.
And you're looking for the truth of this moment, because that's the most you can really hope for if it's shifting all the time. And you're looking to find different ways of pushing these feelings down, or of pulling them in so that there is some semblance of stability in them. Which is, I lit my first cigarette when I was 4.5 years old. That, and before that I was eating sugar in a way that was definitely addict oriented. And I'm 4.5 years old. That's amazing to me. That I
So
came out
soothing,
that.
looking for a certain type of soothing, basically happened from the gate, right?
From the gate, as far as I can tell.
From the gate. And when you say feelings, do you mean thinking too, or do you mean the connection of the thought feeling, sort of the thought emotion connection?
Well, when I say feelings, I mean what I talk about these days is usually sensations in my body, and but feelings are these things that are they mean something, and then there's a story that comes along with them, and the story itself then triggers more feelings, and there's a loop that takes place that occurs. So, and when you are raised in an environment that when no one knows what to do with these bad feelings, and you're made to feel bad about having bad feelings, then suffering occurs. And then you're told that suffering, there's some value in suffering. And in fact, there's no value at all in suffering.
So when you aggravate and you're told that your feeling state, which is I like the discernment, I have sensations, right? I have a narrative, this is the head, right? I have a narrative that attaches to these sensations based on history, right? Which support the feeling or make sense of the feeling.
Make sense of it, yeah.
Make sense of the feeling. And then if I'm told that narrative or that experience isn't correct, it actually creates more of the bad feeling.
Yeah. And then we're into the animal nature of us, which means survival, which means it's stronger than anything I, as an individual, can throw at it. Because if I'm told that I am wrong for feeling the way I feel, that means I'm thrown out of the herd. And now I'm on my own. And I have to then come up with a narrative that makes it okay for me to be on my own, and which puts me in a state of being even more disconnected from, which puts me in a state of fear.
Right. If I were okay in the herd, that means I wouldn't have these bad feelings. I wouldn't feel this way. The herd would embrace me more.
If I were one of them.
Right. And when I'm told that my experience is you're bad, you are not right because you are having this experience, I start disconnecting from the herd.
Yeah, and it's there's so many factors in there that I don't know exactly where you enter the circle, where one enters the circle. Some people I know, myself included, feel like aliens. I remember thinking when I was just a little kid, who are these people and why did my real parents drop me off here? And when are they coming back to pick me up?
Right.
And why is this happening?
So in my line of work, so much of what I hear is, and maybe this is part of it, I'm sure it is I never truly felt a part of.
Yeah.
And so what you're saying is the original experience of the narrative of these physical sensations as being off and wrong and all those things could have been the source of not feeling a part of. And then you're left to your own interpretation.
Well, yes. And you have these giants who are in charge. And if you don't please them, they don't feed you. If you don't please them, they don't keep offering you shelter and some semblance of love or acceptance. And they tell you that's wrong. I'll give you something to cry about. Do you ever get that ringing in your ears that's like not tinnitus? It's the music of the spheres. It's the music of creation, according to the Veda. When I was like 6 years old, I would hear that. And it was just like this high-pitched sort of hum or squeal, something. And I was standing in the middle of my grandmother's kitchen listening to it in the sunlight, and and my mother said, "What are you doing?" I said, "Do you know that sound that you?" She said, "No." And it wasn't like, "No, what sound?" It was like, "No, just you're wrong." And like, "Oh, I'm wrong."
So the anti Mr. Rogers, right? Like his whole vibe. I just saw his movie. His whole vibe in a documentary. His whole vibe was about helping kids be accepting of feelings.
Oh my
That was
God.
his whole mission. Is part of his whole mission was you are safe to have experience. Now, you know, that was a dedicated lifetime. What a righteous individual, and he didn't impose his beliefs on people, but that was his main mission.
So he was curious about what was going on with the other and asking them to express it so that he could hold it for them or help them hold it.
And they could be safe having feelings.
And they could be safe having feelings.
So many people don't have that experience. So fast forward a lifetime of I'm in it by myself. The big people, the parents, aren't helping me cope with this. I'm going to figure it out. I have to please them, but I also have to figure it out for myself. Puts me into survival mode. I like that in a sense of there's an urgency. How am I going to create peace for myself, left to my own devices? And then fast forward the story of Jeff Kober, right? When did you find meditation? Where were you in your life?
Well, there's another thing that goes on here, which is the separation of who I know myself to be and who I'm presenting to the world. And I'm giving my best impersonation of what a human might be like based upon your reaction. So I'm constantly checking you. Is this okay? Is this okay? Is this okay? Exhausting. You need a drink after something like that. And then there's the sense that I'm wrong, and then tragedy ensues and something happens where I was in an accident when I was a kid and someone died. And I wasn't charged. I wasn't doing anything illegal, but someone died. And then it was like, yes, you are wrong. You don't belong, and you don't deserve to be alive. And so then that was a couple of decades of that. And then I finally, I got a job as an actor that was supposed to fix everything. It was supposed to make everything make sense.
Because you've arrived.
Yeah,
And
because
it's
it's like
your art,
finally,
your
this is something. If I get the approval of a major motion picture studio, then I'll feel okay. And nothing happened. I remember I got told that I had my first job in a Columbia motion picture, third lead, and I said, "So do I have the job or not?" And as they were about to tell me yes, I watched the inside of my head for it to change and everything to just go finally. And nothing happened.
Do you know what I heard? I heard once that the experience, I can't validate this, but somebody told me this, that the experience of getting an Academy Award is so powerful and it lasts for 4 days. And then after that, you get your miserable self back right again.
Yeah.
That you think the arrival feeling there is so profound.
Well, and what my experience was, that was the one thing that was still giving me hope.
The Academy Award?
The just getting a job.
Oh, okay.
Getting a job, and I imagine it would be the same thing as an Academy Award. If only I got that. And once that's gone, there's nothing out ahead of you. For me, there's nothing, and I could no longer get drunk. I could no longer feel a click inside of me. I could no longer get free of the discomfort, the horrible discomfort of being me.
You mean after
getting a job?
Meaning the things that were working before to make you feel better stop working?
Stopped working completely.
Because you're so disappointed.
Because the existential hopelessness and horror of life had become absolutely real to me. So then you're walking around with this existential hopelessness and horror, and you're having the same feeling you've been having before, which is, I don't belong. There's something wrong with me. I'm broken. And there are plenty of people who will, co-sign that for you. Yep, you are broken. Come with me. I'll fix you. Nope, that didn't work. I must be even more broken than I thought. And again and again and again. And finally, I just gave up. I said, this is it. I've got about 70% of life back. This is going to have to be enough because if it hasn't changed by now. And I was meditating. I'd been to India. I was reading massive tomes about, Vedic truth and everything else. And still, it wasn't going in. It just wasn't changing anything. And then I learned this meditation, and almost immediately something shifted, because the meditation that I learned allowed me to transcend my relative world experience of life. It allowed me to transcend my feelings, my thoughts, my physical sensations, my history, my ideas about myself, my opinions, my relationships, all this thing that we call life is not the truth. And it's not the truth we can see because it changes all the time. My opinions are different than they were before I walked in this room.
I like to say when I do, there's a brand of therapy that I think you'd like if you knew it. It's called acceptance and commitment therapy, and it's the author of it is the child of 12-step people. It's very thoughtful, and they use language called cognitive diffusion, and self as content versus self as context. And I like to talk about my 10-year-old self cries when I leave Disneyland, and my 51-year-old self cries when I go to Disneyland. Right? So like the story is completely changed.
Yeah.
And the conviction of the 10-year-old is so different than the conviction of the 51-year-old. Something has dramatically changed in my interpretation of the same event.
Yes.
So I think that's what you're talking about. And the other thing I reflect on when you say that is that any good therapy is probably going to create an observer and not an enmeshment with the story. So that I start in, when I'm hearing you talk about this, there's something else that allows me to see the story from a different vantage point than being immersed in it. And that's what that truth, that thing that shifted, is a different vantage point.
Absolutely. Yeah. And with meditation, I was never able to find it psychologically or mentally, but with meditation, we drop into, it's called the witness self, or the true ground state, or the place of spirit, the transcendent. And it's this place of non-change. It's always the same thing. It's always there. It's always underlying everything. And we can experience it to some degree when I think everyone probably has some experience from when they're a kid where suddenly they see life in some different way. Mine was a dark experience where I was sitting next to a stream, or it was actually irrigation ditch. Stream sounds better. And I was listening to the water, and I was sitting there. It was a summer evening, and I was about 6 years old, and I looked back up toward my parents' house and just thought, it's another 12 years till I can leave here. And that was a moment of clarity, a moment of like, some part of me was able to see life from where I began to where I was to where I would be. I saw an overview. That was the witness self. And that same witness self is here today and can remember other moments throughout life of being able to see things that weren't put there by someone else. The seeing was mine. The seeing was of me, from some underlying truth.
And when you say it's not a psychological technique, what I hear in that, and what's been my experience, keyword experience, is I needed to experience something, not just think something.
Yes.
So
Absolutely.
there's something about this that lends to an experience of life, of a living being that is different than talking about it.
There's a man by the name of Franklin Merrill Wolfe who wrote a couple of books about his enlightenment experience. He was part of the California group of John Lilly and these guys who founded Esalen. He knew all of them. Michael Murphy, who wrote Golf in the Kingdom, and his seminal work, the one that tracked his progress into enlightenment, was called The Philosophy of Consciousness Without an Object. So it's pure consciousness without relationship to. All my thinking is in relationship to something, myself, some other aspect of myself, some other idea. This is consciousness relating to nothing. So an experience of oneness, an experience of totality, an experience of without boundaries, that underlying field.
Beautiful. As you say it, I think about myself now, with a lot of similar experience. Although I'm not an actor, a collection of pain followed by a lot of investment in self-improvement on many levels, and then adding this meditation. And I can't say that my thinking is a great thinking. Doesn't feel great. Thinking and experiencing and in the narrative of the sensations doesn't always feel great. However, in the collective, there's a certain grounded truth that I am moving towards being a better father, being a better role, being a better husband, being a better friend, being a better worker, being a better sibling, being a better son. And there's something about that experience that feels so right. And it's not about the immediate moment. It's more of it feels more connected to the consciousness that you're describing. It's not about what I think in a given moment. It's about a collection of experience.
And David Hawkins, whom I love and who teaches non-duality, Western non-duality, says we change the world not by what we do, but by what we have become. And you're describing a state of constant becoming. Constantly, and this is the Vedic perspective of creation is, it's not a billiard ball universe. It's that everything arises from the field itself spontaneously. That I do, you do, and then we're here in order to expand, grow, evolve into the fullest and purest expressions of what we are.
So you've mentioned the Vedic teachings many times. Is that the philosophy that is attached to the meditation?
It's the set of teachings from which the meditation comes. Veda, V-E-D-A, Veda, means knowledge. And the Veda is a set of teachings that comes out of what is now India, Pakistan, Kashmir, thousands of years ago, and it was originally an oral teaching, and then began to be written down some 5,000 years ago. And it speaks of itself as being the knowledge of or science of consciousness itself. And
that field that you were talking about.
Yeah, it says it says that there is one thing that underlies all of what is, and everything is an expression from this one thing. And that this field, this much like the modern day physicists call it the unified field, or speak of, you can't prove that the unified field exists, but that seems to explain how all this is here. There is this one field, and this field is consciousness itself. And so it's like there's an ocean of consciousness, or awareness is another way of saying it. And then that's the place of pure being. And then there are waves upon this field. That's the place of activity. Me, I'm waving my arms around, I'm speaking, I'm thinking, I'm feeling. We're in relationship to each other, one wave looking at another wave, and thinking, I want to be a better wave, and I want to be in touch with something, all these other waves. But in fact, if I settle into that place of pure being, I am all these other waves. I am the whole of what is. And no matter how great the storm on the surface of the ocean, if you go deep enough, there's just that place of
and the storm being is an extension of being. if I allow myself to connect, it's part of the wave.
Yeah.
If I connect beneath the wave, I am grounded. I am in that place of ground.
And even the use of the word connection implies looking at this from the perspective of the wave, because the wave is never disconnected from the ocean. And if you watch a wave come through the water, it's not separate from the ocean. It's an energy that moves through. You watch a piece of flotsam out there in the water, the wave comes through, it just raises the flotsam straight up and straight down. It doesn't push it forward. It's not a thing. The wave is not a thing. It's a momentary energy
Right.
in the underlying field.
So somewhat switching gears, you've become this teacher. Your teacher says you need to be a teacher. I would imagine you have taught so many people over the years.
Yeah.
So, in our line of work, and this podcast is really about getting better. Who are we've spoken about, topics such as digital addiction, anxiety, people who beat themselves up. We had one on self-compassion, on challenges of high-level performer athletes, struggles of in college, collegiate recovery. We've had a whole array of topics, trauma and so forth, and food addiction. We've really covered a lot. So in your space, who are the people who are reaching out to you saying, please, I want help with meditation? What are you noticing? Who comes to Jeff Kober?
All different sorts. Lately, it's been a lot of artists and some philanthropists and people who are really functioning at a high level in some area and are saying, is that all there is? Or saying, I want more. Who are saying, what's this imbalance about? Who are saying, I'm doing what I want to be doing, but it doesn't feel right. It doesn't feel good. It's not, excuse me, it's not giving me what I think or what I thought this was supposed to give me.
Right. So similar to you, the individuals who are coming in have a profound disappointment and disillusionment with here they're looking at their life. It was supposed to feel good because I did this and I played it this way and I've arrived allegedly and I'm still empty.
Yeah, I'm still empty. I'm still not, I feel like I'm not even in the game,
And then they come to you saying, I want to learn meditation in order to. And what is the usual menu list of what do they want to see? I don't know if they're even I don't even know if they're aware of what you just said.
Well, actually, I have on my intake form a question: why do you want to learn meditation? And almost to a person, it's about less anxiety. They want less anxiety. They want to be able to sleep better. They want to feel better about themselves.
So most of the people want to have a better experience about the way they perceive themselves.
Perception is one, the way they feel to be in this body, the way they feel on this planet.
So, as we do this, I get questions from our wonderful producer here. This is a very good question. When people come in, do they have a myth that the meditation that you're going to provide them is going to be a certain experience? I want to feel better, but in this space of meditation, I'm going to feel so good. I'm not going to feel anything. I'm going to sit with my legs crossed and feel like this Zen experience.
What the single biggest misconception, and this was mine, before I learned this meditation, I thought if I could just get my mind to shut up, I would feel. I used to want to take my head off and set it aside. That's the only thing that felt like it would actually do something for me. So they think it's going to stop their thinking, and they also think it's going to take them out of the experience of being in a body. And in fact, it's the other way around. It puts you into the experience of being a body and makes it available to you. Here's what it actually does. Rather than speak about what people think it's supposed to do, what it actually does is it gives you a download of bliss chemistry So you start actually putting chemistry in that is works counter to the stress chemistry.
To the extent you know, because I don't read in my journals about bliss chemistry.
Okay.
Right? So what is bliss chemistry?
Bliss chemistry is it's serotonin.
Okay.
So it's
the feel good,
it's the feel good chemistry, the stuff that all leaves you as soon as you hear the tiger roar. Happy cave people do not run as fast as terrified cave people. So when fight, flight, freeze occurs, all the happiness chemistry goes away.
So what comes in the parasympathetic response, the resurgence of relaxation and
Yes.
settling,
Yes.
the meditation activates.
It activates the parasympathetic response. Yes. And it as well, it begins to melt away. See, I'm talking to a doctor now, so I have to say,
I invited you here, so I want the
okay.
Renaissance man non-doctor.
In the Vedic, in Sanskrit, there's a word. Well, all of consciousness is described as Sat Chit Ananda, and Sat is existence. Chit is consciousness, the awareness of existence, and Ananda is bliss. Okay, so Chit refers to, there's a word called chitta, which is the stuff of the mind. And in the stuff of the mind, in this metaphysical sense, grooves have been cut by my overwhelming experiences of life, by my fight, flight, freeze experiences of life. So that in survival, in a survival sense, I was beat up by Randy V when I was in the 8th grade. He was wearing a red hoodie and it was raining. So if I see someone tall, he kicked my ass, tall in a red hoodie and it's raining, I'll go into fight, flight, freeze. Maybe not realizing this is about Randy. Now, that means that I'm going to have a potentially maladaptive response to certain inputs, because someone in a red hoodie in the rain does not necessarily probably doesn't mean I'm going to get beat up, but my body might go into feeling like something's wrong, something's off, it's that guy, and then I might start a fight with that guy because I feel threatened by him. That's in a groove. That's like a rut that I fall into with that sensory input. Meditation actually allows that groove to become fluid or plastic, and it allows it to be able to change and flatten out and disappear, so that I can begin to build new pathways rather than being at the mercy of my history. We have literally, from what I hear, we have hundreds of thousands of these so-called stress triggers stored in the cells of our body, so that by the time we're adults, we're looking at the world through colored lenses. It doesn't matter what color the flower is. If I have orange lenses on, it's an orange flower. Yeah.
So the meditation starts to unwind or challenge the existing preconceived sets of stress history.
It literally allows them to begin to melt away, because we're dropping into an experience of self that is other than that.
So you're not a doctor, and I like that for the purpose of this discussion, as a person as a witness. With that in mind, what are you noticing in terms of the changes that you see in people as a result of tapping into this bliss chemistry?
Number one, you can accomplish more because you're working less against yourself.
Consistent with what I said, I felt like I got a second day.
Yeah, because if you're working against the stresses of your system, that those stresses are saying, let's put it in slightly broader terms. If we look at ourselves as spirit having a human-animal experience, I am spirit, and instead of me being this person trying to get in touch with spirit, I am spirit having this animal experience, okay? Spirit, the word for spirit or totality in Sanskrit is Brahman. That word comes from the root br, which means to expand. So spirit is about expansion, growth, evolution, becoming more and more.
Ever growing,
Ever growing,
never
always,
graduating.
eternally.
Yes.
Animal nature is about staying small enough to protect. So my animal nature, my ego, if you will, always is saying, keep it small. Don't get too big for your britches. My mother's voice. Don't try something you haven't done before because you're going to look like an idiot. They're going to kill you for it. And spirit is going, expand, expand, expand. So as I start to identify as spirit and this need to expand and desire to expand, I identify less with smallness and keeping it small. So I naturally begin to grow, which feels right to my soul, right to my heart, right to the truth of me. And this only will continue and only can be engaged in if we also begin to change our the way we talked about it earlier, the way we're looking at it, our perspective on what this machine is telling us.
Right. It includes a fundamental belief about what the sensation, the discernment of sensation and narrative that you were talking about is the fundamental belief of your theory. And it explains, it helps people understand and make sense of why they feel stuck.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So there is an insight piece of this that is involved in Vedic meditation.
I look at it as we have to look at the mechanics of how I am the way I am and how I keep being the way I am and why I am the way I am. We all have a mythology, a personal mythology, that whether we were raised in a religion or not, we had to make sense of the messages we were getting from the universe and from the people around us and what it felt like to be me.
So the word that you're using to describe the experience of people who dedicate themselves to the meditation, which I relate to as expansiveness, is connecting to spirit and growth.
Mm-hmm.
And I want to touch on this there are many brands of meditation. I know there's the beginnings of research, which one is the best. There's the loving kindness, there's progressive muscle relaxation, there's breath work, there's a whole slew of traditions and so forth. Your meditation is, and in psychology now, we kind of ripped off the East and we throw around the word mindfulness, borrowing from thousands of years of tradition and secularizing it. It's part of industry. There's books called Mindfulness-Based Relapse Prevention. There's workbooks, there's evidence-based everything.
Mm-hmm.
And here's the Renaissance man actor meditation teacher with a mantra-based meditation, which is different, right?
Mm-hmm.
Which is different, and it's a different experience. Can you speak to the mantra piece of this in your meditation practice?
Well, first of all, just in terms of mindfulness, it's absolutely essential outside of the twice daily meditation to practice mindfulness, to simply to have my mind where I am rather than where I'm not. Because if I am in the past thinking about how it should have happened, or in the future thinking about how it's supposed to happen, I'm causing myself to suffer. That's speculation, and it brings none of me to the present moment.
Correct. But since I'm a practitioner of this myself, the experience of meditation for me is not rooted in come back, force yourself to come back. No. That's a different tool. The mantra works in this fashion that the mind is always looking. I think that as animals, we're always looking for happiness. We're looking for comfort. Feel goods. Freud wouldn't disagree. He called it the pleasure principle.
Okay. And so survival first, survival of species second, and comfort third. So we're always looking for comfort, happiness. We're looking because happiness means, more of me. And so I'm always looking for happiness. And so I'm going to just let my mind do what my mind does. And then I have a mantra that is given to the individual based upon the understanding that and the idea that it will be attractive to the mind of that individual. So you have all these thoughts swimming around and your mind is like looking for which one of them is going to give it greater happiness. Then you throw in this mantra. It's in Sanskrit. It's a meaningless sound. And suddenly the mind goes, hang on, what's that? And it's attracted to that mantra.
So it's kind of mind fucked.
It kind of
Mind fucked.
Mind fucked.
It's a mind fuck of sorts in the sense that my mind is attracted to it.
It's a shiny object. You
Yeah.
know, I'm a crow. It's a shiny. Wait, what's that?
Uh-huh.
And then we teach how to repeat this mantra in an almost effortless fashion. So remember that idea of waves upon the ocean. Activity moves me in the direction of activity. Being or non-activity moves me in the direction of being. So I repeat the mantra as effortlessly as possible, and it is designed to be forgotten. It is designed to disappear. It is designed to settle down to the more subtle layers of thought, and the mind attracted to it will follow it. It will follow it because it feels good to follow it. And as the system settles down, we're moving more in the direction of that place of pure being, which Sat Chit Ananda, the very nature of what I am, is Ananda, or bliss itself. The mind starts to quiet down because it stops having ideas of what needs to happen in order for it to be okay, in order for it to find happiness.
So this is so very different than bring yourself back to the breath. Bring yourself back to the breath.
Yes.
Not that that's not, that's wonderful and
That's
works.
a training that
and
changes something.
It's definitely, from our seat, the mindfulness that I'm describing, the breath work, definitely leads to symptom reduction of many conditions.
Mm-hmm.
But this is, and I do both actually, right?
Mm-hmm.
So this is a very different experience where I invite something of a charming nature somehow. I don't know that it's charming, a mantra. I don't know it intellectually, just by if you say it, I would never know it's charming. But in my thought life, in my cerebral space, somehow it settles me, right? Somehow it's mysterious. Somehow there's a charm.
It takes me to that place. Bliss is I think, a fairly misunderstood concept. Bliss is not euphoria. As someone who has in the past taken substances to feel different, I was always looking for euphoria, because euphoria was big enough to work against the pain I was in, the discomfort I was in. Bliss is not euphoria. Bliss is the feeling of supreme inner contentedness, where like sometimes 10, 11 o'clock at night where everything is done and you don't have anything to do, and you've got, 15, 20 minutes, an hour where it's just your time. That's bliss. Just nothing needs to change. Everything is exactly where it needs to be right now. That's bliss. That's the very nature of what I am. And as the mind moves in the direction of that, it wants to keep moving in the direction of that. It wants that. That's why it's the reason I've been able to meditate twice a day for almost 20 years now is not because I'm just really committed, though I am. Because some days I wake up and the guy who's committed is not in the driver's seat. But it's because I want that experience, and not in the way of wanting a drug experience or a euphoria experience. Just in the sense of I'm not interested in a life that forgoes the very thing that I think life is supposed to give me. Everything we do in life is to give me that experience of just like, finally, I'm okay.
So I speak to this not as psychologists studying outcomes, but as the guy who watched this man in the meeting go from looking immensely bothered to looking not bothered at all. And I'm watching the experience and saying, I want to have that experience. And there's a lot of outcomes are very important in our line of work. And I'm wondering, I know that Vedic is at a minimum a first cousin of transcendental meditation.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah,
maybe even siblings. Maybe even almost siblings. The same, right? Maybe even almost the same.
I am at liberty to say that the meditation I teach is probably the way that transcendental meditation was being taught 40 years ago.
Either way, at the time, there was definitely research.
Yes.
And sometimes I'll see it in the mix, transcendental, not Vedic. I'll see it in the mix of meditation as, at a minimum, we know there's benefit.
Yes.
So we know there's benefit from that brand of meditation, the transcendental meditation that includes impact on health symptoms, meaning blood pressure, right? Heart rate, all the things that one would hope, stress, right? All the things that meditation is being sold as to the West.
Yes.
Is it the same with Vedic from what you know?
Absolutely. And as you're talking, it occurs to me to say, you know, these stresses that we carry from really in utero. I mean, my mother smoked while I was in utero. And, you know, and I was listening to your podcast with the dietitian, and he was talking about the way that when we're fed formula, we learn this comfort of the comfort of food, of bad food from the youngest age possible. Sure. We're built into addicts from that age. There's all that stress that's in us, and then there is the stress of life not behaving the way I think it should behave, and constantly confronting the way things are based upon my idea of the way things need to be in order for me to be happy. When you start to let go of those stresses, and when you begin to know yourself as this underlying field of non-change, the world begins to appear to you as an adventure to be engaged in, rather than a battle of what is with what's supposed to be.
Not kind of like, it's not a have to, it's an I get to.
It's an I get to, and it's like, oh, this is interesting. Oh, I didn't see that coming. You know, it's like you were talking about Mr. Rogers. Like, oh, tell me more about that feeling, rather than that's the wrong feeling to have. It's like, I never thought a kid would have that kind of a feeling. Tell me about that. And knowing that whatever it is that's being revealed is going to be an expansion on my experience of life, rather than a challenge to my experience of life.
Keeps coming back to that place of ground. That place
of ground, yeah.
That place of that isn't the narrative. That isn't the story that I'm immersed in. And I just want to wrap up and say it's so interesting to me. I'm grateful. Here I am. This actor guy has taught me for years already and continues to teach me. And I don't watch TV. I got roped into 24, and my teacher killed the black president, the African American president on 24. He shot him dead as an actor, and he's teaching me how to find connection. I just find it very funny and very telling about the world to me, which is there's a Jewish concept really that I know I'm doing well, right, if I can learn from every person that I encounter. And I really have learned so much from you. And I encourage people who are struggling. My experience with this has been, it's been a game changer. So for the audience who's listening, how would someone reach Jeff Kober?
Jeff-Kober.com, Kober. You can reach me through there. You can email me from there. You can find information about my acting or my meditation. And I have to tell this Vedic story.
Please.
Based upon what you just said. There's the oldest extant story in the world is the Ramayana. It's the story of Prince Ram and rescuing his wife Sita from Ravana, the demon. And Ravana is where we get our English word ravenous. So Ravana was he stole Sita because he was in love with her, and the world went to war. And Ram is an avatar of Vishnu, God become incarnate. And he's the first, there's a whole lineage of times that God has become incarnate, that Vishnu has become man. And when Ram triumphed and Ravana was lying there dying, pierced by 1,000 arrows, his troops were going to go and tear him apart. And Ram said, stop. He's magnificent. Look at him. You treat him with dignity and respect. And he went to Ravana and asked him, he says, clearly you are a creature of magnificence. You're a great being. Why did you choose to be evil? And Ravana said, because I wanted to meet God, and I knew that by being good it would take me 1,000 lifetimes, but by being evil, I was able to do it in one.
It's a fast pass.
It's a
right.
fast
It's like
pass.
having the thing at the airport where you don't have to do it's clear. It's
and
clear.
It's essential for the whole that darkness is embodied.
So the message to everybody is there are different paths. Don't be too hard on yourself if you're choosing a tough one, right? You may get enlightenment quicker than you know.
If you've listened all the way to the end, you're probably on a good path, whatever you're doing.
That's right. Well, thank you so much. It's been a privilege.
Thank you, man. What a pleasure. Thank you.
This podcast is for general information and entertainment purposes only. This should not be considered treatment advice, nor is it a substitute for an individual treatment plan. If you have questions or concerns about your individual situation, it is strongly recommended you consult a licensed professional to talk about things that are specific to you. If there is an emergency, it is strongly recommended you seek treatment at your nearest emergency room.